Fisher, and I've been working with Professor Janko on creating the Index Locorum for his new book. So Professor Janko is working on a book that was found in Herculaneum. This is a city near Pompeii that was actually buried by Vesuvius, which is the same volcano that buried Pompeii. And it had a very large library, which was preserved because of the eruption. Unfortunately, because of the way things were excavated, the book is actually in fragments. So Professor Janko has had to put the whole thing back together from different fragments, and then he's translated it. And he's working on Poems 2 by Philodemus, who's an author that we actually only have from the libraries of Herculaneum. So that's super cool. I was working on the Index Locorum, which just means the index of places. It's the list of works cited, and I worked with only the ancient references. So I compiled them into a list which looks something like this. I used Google Docs because it allowed me to highlight places where I found something that wasn't quite exactly right, and it let me keep really organized because I could just bring them right up to Professor Janko later because they were already highlighted. So what was I looking at that I found little problem spots? I wasn't just putting all of these references in a list. I actually was checking all of them as I went along as well. So I was looking at things like line variations and spelling, and Greek is also a language that has accent marks over every single word. So sometimes the difference between a little dash that faces this way and one that faces this way is an entirely different word, and those are the kinds of things that I was looking for. This is a page from Professor Janko's manuscript that I was working on. And all of the writing in the margins over here are places where I found things that weren't quite exactly the way that they were supposed to be. So that's why this work is important. All of these things are very, very tiny, and they're very, very easy to miss. But if their manuscript is sent off to the editors with these things still in them, then it can be published with very small errors in it, and that's something that we really try and avoid as much as possible. In some cases, it was pretty easy to do the checking. So this website is called the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, and it lets you search authors here, and then you click on the author that you're looking for, and it brings up a list of all the works by that author that are supported by the website. It was really useful to me because in places where I didn't find the reference exactly where I was looking for it, it let me search specific words that I knew were inside the reference, and then I could find where the reference actually was instead of just saying, well, it's not where I thought it was supposed to be. It can get a little more complicated though, because like, if you type in Diogenes, these are all people named Diogenes. And if you don't know which one you're looking for, then you're gonna run into some difficulties. Sometimes it gets a little more complicated than even that though, because the TLG is not an all-encompassing resource. Although there are several works that are not supported by the website. And sometimes even just the editor or edition was a different version than what Professor Janko used, so I had to go and check a lot of books out of the library. These are just some of the books that I had checked out, actually. There's a whole other stack that I realized was not in the picture, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of a reference for how many things that we were actually working with. And that brings us to the library. Even within the library system, it gets complicated because the library doesn't actually own all the books that I needed. So I had to go to an outside database to tell the outside database to tell our library that I needed it to order some of the books that I found. And then our library system, Merlin, is a really very good library system, but it has some, I ran into some problems with it because things weren't always exactly where I thought they were going to be. And this really drove home the importance of modern Romance languages and German for me. These are things they make you learn as a classic student in grad school, and that's not just because they want to laugh at your pain. To actually need them. So these 5 books are all in French. That one's in German. There's several in here that are in Italian as well, and even some that are in modern Greek. So if you don't know these languages, then you're missing out on a large part of the discourse about these works, and that's really problematic. You actually do need to know them. And it was a problem spot for me when I was trying to find the books, because each of these languages has a different spelling and pronunciation of ancient names. So, for example, when I was looking for Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Professor Janko used the French version of those books, and in French, Dionysius is Dennis. So no matter how many ways I searched Dionysius, nothing was coming up because there's no Dionysius in French. These are just a few of the things that I ran into while I was working with Professor Janko on his index. But I hope they give you an idea of the type of work that really goes into the translations of these books and the scope of them. It really is a very, very difficult and time-consuming job. Thank you.
So you mentioned Dionysius as Dennis. Was there another funny different spelling or different use of names that you have to share?
I know that Philodemus, which is the main work that I was searching, is I think Philodini in Italian. So that's another one that I had trouble finding because I was spelling it wrong.
I'm just curious which aspect of all the fact checking and so forth you found most fun.
I actually really liked working with the TLG because it has so many different resources with it. It allows you to search not just the work that you're inside of, but actually the entire every single work that they have on there, which was really interesting to me. And I really liked learning about all the different things that I can maybe use in the future. So that was fun.
Did your professor ever complain that you found so many mistakes in your work?
I think my professor is very hard on himself, and he does a lot of very difficult work, and there's always going to be errors when you're working with so little details.
I was actually grateful for every error that you found.
So besides learning about some of these resources, what else did you take from the project? For example, did your Greek improve, or what else was the benefit for you of the project?
My Greek actually did improve. I'm actually only a first-year Greek student, so learning about things like elision, which is where sometimes letters get skipped because of the sound that it's at the beginning of the next word, and just little quirks of the language like that were really helpful for me that I'm maybe going to have to use next year when I'm actually doing real translations.
So having the benefit of looking over Professor Janko's shoulder, I guess I'm going to ask, what was the first or most salient moment when you realized he was a total freak of nature to be doing such a thing?
I think I'd actually heard of Professor Janko before I even started working with him, so I already was coming in with a little bit of that, wow. Hope I can live up to his expectations.
What was the coolest book that you had to check out? Like you thought, oh man, it's really cool that I have a copy of this.
Actually, anything with Philodemus really was, because he's a more recent discovery. All of these things that Professor Janko has been working with, they are from Herculaneum, and he's one of the authors that we hadn't had before that. So just the idea that there's still authors, we haven't translated all of the papyri that we found there, and the idea that there's still authors out there that maybe no one has ever even touched yet because we haven't even unrolled their scrolls is really exciting for me. Thank you.